This is part 2. If you want to catch part 1, go to our channel and look for this same episode number and look for part 1. And so we want to continue this discussion about the MAGA movement a little bit. So you had in the prep some very good insight about some failing MAGA strategies. We've kind of talked about some winning MAGA and trying to get regular, average, everyday people to vote.
Yeah.
But now some stuff that's not working, some bad optics, to say the least. So there was something that happened where Joe Rogan, in an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, he had a guest on.
Yep.
And said that he liked RFK Jr. Yep. And it sounds like basically endorsed him. He may not have said, I completely endorse everything he stands for, but said, I like him.
Didn't sound like he was voting for Trump or Harris.
And I'm not wanting to vote for Trump or Harris.
Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of people, these big, accounts on Twitter and Instagram with American flags in the bio, etc., just started losing their crap.
Yep.
And losing their mind and say, we can't believe you. How could you do this? You're wrong. So on. Then the very similar reaction to Kyle Rittenhouse. So Kyle Rittenhouse, for those of you who don't know, was in Kenosha, Wisconsin. There was a bunch of rioting. He had an AR shouldered on his AR rifle on his shoulders. Went over there to provide medical care. He had some first aid kit and some other things. So he was trying to take care of some people that were hurt in the rioting. Mm-hmm. And he was charged by 3 people. He shot them. He ended up going to jail for a short time and then had to go before a trial. He was thankfully found innocent on all counts.
On self-defense,
So, it was found to be self-defense. And thank God for that.
Yep.
I like the guy. I don't know him personally. And the thing is, so then he put out a tweet saying Trump has failed on certain Second Amendment issues and I will not be voting for him.
Right.
About 24 hours later, maybe a little less, he had another tweet saying, I've talked to people on the Trump campaign, realized that Trump is going to defend our Second Amendment, which is why I'm endorsing him.
Right.
And the initial tweet, the first one, similar thing, got hammered over and over by these right-wing accounts, these conservative people that said, we can't believe. And some things they said was that, look, we've had your back. Trump has had your back from day one. You're turning on him. Okay, is that true? Sure. But Rittenhouse is not your slave, right?
Yeah.
Rittenhouse is a human being with an opinion, with a conscience. He can decide how he wants to vote, what he wants to say.
100%.
And he's also a young guy. And it just, my heart goes out to him because this guy has a social media account and is just being slammed unjustly.
About political stuff.
Right.
And he's not a politician.
That's the other thing is this guy is a gun advocate. And when I look at him, I say, okay, if I were to use the term single issue voter, I'm not trying to say it with a negative connotation. I would say Kyle on the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing to be a single issue voter on. The Second Amendment is very important, right?
100%.
I think you should be more nuanced, but that's one man's opinion. He can have his opinion. And when I read that, I said, it didn't really change my opinion of Kyle Rittenhouse. I said, okay, that's your view. And there were so many people that just went absolutely ballistic. And then whenever he said, I've changed my mind, there was a decent amount of people that said, okay, thank you.
No.
There was also a decent amount that said, oh, I can't believe you said that to begin with. Now you're having to come crying to us and cowering to us. You're weak. And it was just a lot of bad faith attacks.
Yeah.
So you made some very good points and said, this is not a good look.
No.
This is chasing people away and saying, well, with that, why would I vote Republican? And that's just a bad look. There is a point. This is my point to people. There's a point where you should gatekeep. Yeah. I want the Nikki Haley's and the Chris Christie's out of our movement. I do.
Yeah, no question.
But there's other people that are not our enemies. There's other people that may think about things a little bit differently, but we should look at them and speak to them and talk to them. And sometimes they may bring up a cogent criticism. Other times they may not. We may need to make videos saying, okay, so, for example, Elon Musk said this is why he's wrong, in a very level-headed and logical way.
Yeah.
Other times we should say, okay, well, no, he made a very valid point over here, whether it be Kyle or Elon or whoever. And I just say Elon because he's another one that's leans conservative, but is not really one of our guys. He's not really a dyed-in-the-wool Republican conservative type of guy. He is viscerally sort of conservative, and that's about it.
Yep.
And so that's my mindset when it comes to him. So, yeah, go ahead and talk about these both events with RFK Jr. And with Kyle Rittenhouse. Would love to hear you restate your opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a difference between criticizing somebody and attacking somebody. These two events, I think, have not been critiques, especially like the main comments have not been critiques; they've been attacks. You know, I'm sure there's people out there that have, like you or I, that would critique things like this. Yeah, but we're not going.
We've talked about RFK Jr. in a very logical, level-headed way, and said he's great here. Here's some things we really disagree with. Yes.
Abortion, which he's walked back, but still he sucks. On that side of things, vaccines and stuff, sure, great, but but no, I again, there is a difference between criticizing and completely attacking a person. Attacking is the side of the left, and when I say the left, I don't mean I don't know how many times I've said this. When I say Democrats and stuff like that, I'm talking about like the major media outlets and just the major spokespeople. I mean, yes, there are I'm not worried about the small Democrat voters. I'm talking about people with followings. Those are the people that I'm talking about. But anyway, the tactic of the left is attack, and if you're not with us, you're against us, you suck, this, that, and the other, whatever. You're dumb, you're stupid, everything else. Now we've got MAGA and big parts of MAGA sitting there saying like, oh man, Joe Rogan's an idiot. The blonde of talk shows and stuff. It's like, dude, what? The guy's got tons of money. Like, first off, I can't stand people that call people with like a lot of money dumb, because it's like they had to be somewhat smart to get there, for the most part, unless you're like out there selling drugs and stuff, of course, because I mean that but anyway, aside the point,
most people don't usually keep their money,
right? Exactly. So but it's like, I mean, no, Joe Rogan's not dumb. He had one of the top podcasts for the longest time. I mean, again, he's still up there. People. Right. If you mention Joe Rogan, people know.
Oh yeah.
I think he's
went from being a podcast just for people that like UFC.
Yeah.
To so many, just millions of people worldwide.
Yeah, just a general here's my opinion on things. And it's
because he will talk about almost anything.
Oh yeah, he's what I told you earlier is I think he's kind of like a Elon Musk is like he's not really like right, left, this, that, and the other. He's just kind of like a truth seeker, and what he finds as truth, he's gonna say. Same with Elon. Elon's kind of gone over to the right, but I wouldn't call him a Republican necessarily. But he's just found this side as of right now better because of certain values and stuff. Same with Joe Rogan. He's found RFK to be better. Okay, cool.
We can disagree,
right?
But that's his decision.
That doesn't make you stupid.
I will say I'm not frankly that surprised because I don't know when the last time this guy voted Republican.
Oh yeah, no question.
He's voted. Let's see. I think it was Ron Paul in 2012, or maybe it was even earlier when Ron Paul was the Libertarian candidate.
Yeah.
He voted for Gary Johnson in 2016,
the
Libertarian candidate again, and then Joe Jorgensen in 2020. Another Libertarian candidate. So it's not really like a lot of people are shocked. It's like, well, if you look at how this guy has voted in the past, you are not really politically tuned in if you're enraged by this. This is how this guy tends to be. He's kind of in the middle. He leans right on certain issues, and other issues he definitely leans left when it comes to drug legalization, gay marriage, stuff like that. He definitely leans left, and he's not so much on the left when it comes to, as you just brought up, things like vaccines, which I think is really why he's probably going after RFK and thinking,
because he's called out Fauci and stuff
right.
like that.
And he got enormous criticism from the COVID people. That just thought the COVID cult is what I meant to say, because he took ivermectin. And they just freaking lost their minds. This video is probably going to get a COVID tag on it now because of me saying the forbidden words. But I don't really care.
Won't be the first time.
Yeah, it won't be the first time. And it won't be the last.
That's for sure.
So that being said, he has his opinion. Love it or hate him. That's just the way that it is. And the thing is, people on the left have a horrible double standard of if there's we mentioned Scarlett Johansson earlier about what she said about the White House, whoever makes a political statement, the left is like, well, you guys just need to be a little more tolerant of their political views being different than yours. Then you've got a guy who's on a big podcast, says stuff they don't like about COVID, and they are so angry. Like, there's normies that I've talked to that are like, I used to listen to Joe Rogan, but once he started talking about COVID, I just can't listen to him anymore. And it's like, really? There, you don't have any filter. You don't have any mindset at all of, like you just said, looking at this guy and saying, well, he's a truth seeker. He's trying to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And he's had,
and it might not be true to you, but that's what he came to the conclusion.
And he's had RFK Jr. on, and RFK Jr. has cited the studies for vaccines. Yep. Okay, go in there and dispute that.
Yeah.
Don't attack RFK Jr. personally. Look at the studies he's talked about and say, okay, what are you missing that he's seeing, and have an open mind.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to do that. So, and again, that's on the left. But back to the MAGA thing, I agree with what you had said initially, that I really think that this attacking, like you said, not criticism, but attacking, is going to bite people in the butt, because a lot of people are going to say, it's the idea of shooting your wounded.
Yeah.
I get that Rogan's not wounded, and neither is Kyle Rittenhouse, but you don't want someone to move away a little bit on certain issues and you just kick them out. And again, there's a place for gatekeeping. There absolutely is.
Yeah.
If someone is a liberal
in the political realm, but not like these talk show guys. You don't gotta gatekeep. I don't know that like for Nikki Haley's and stuff like that. Yeah, 100%.
She was running for president.
Right, exactly. But these guys that are just stating opinions and stuff, I'm not gatekeeping that, because if they do state truth, that's good.
Right.
Also, on the Joe Rogan thing, Trump got in on it and made a comment on truth. I don't know it word for word, but criticizing him a bit. And it's like, dude, you're the worst one to do it. Don't do that.
Well, and so there's that. And then there's also, this is when we talked about RFK before, Trump just attacking RFK Jr., calling him more liberal than Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And that was an episode, something we covered in another episode, saying, man, that was a wrong move too.
Yeah. I mean, no.
So we have our criticisms of Trump. We are not Trump cultists. People that love to use that term. We will call Trump out whenever he makes bad decisions. And a lot of the things he said on Twitter and a lot of the things he has said on Truth are missteps. Not all, but some. And that was one of them, attacking him as being more liberal than Joe.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, it didn't really change anybody's mind. What RFK supporter read that and said, oh, shoot. None of them. They all thought, well, that's just Trump being Trump. And they probably went back to doing whatever they were doing.
I mean, no, stuff like that is, I don't know. It doesn't, it hurts you more than it helps you. It definitely doesn't help you. There's a comic out there of, there's a red and a blue guy, and the blue guy's supposed to be the Democrat, the red guy's supposed to be the Republican.
Sure.
And then there's a guy in the middle who's kind of like this undecided, right? Blue guy shoves the red guy, blue guy shoves the undecided guy. Red guy comes over and says, "Hey, you okay?" And then he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And then the blue guy goes, "Why are you siding with this guy?" And that's how it used to be. But now you're turning into, it's a shoving back and forth. Red guy shoving back to blue guy shoving back and forth, because you're turning into these guys that you didn't like. You did not like the left for doing this, and now you're playing the same game, all because they don't fall in line. That's not okay. Again, there is a time for attacking, but when it comes to people that really don't, when they're not politicians, does it matter? Like, does it matter that Joe Rogan is probably going to support RFK Jr.? No.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. He's at least getting, there are leftists, right-wingers, and that follow Joe Rogan. Here's the thing. He's a truth seeker, so he's still pointing out some stuff that the left might agree with and the right might agree with. So that affects the middle ground guys, right? So like vaccines, right? Who might be like, man, I really don't know. And they go and listen to these guys like, Tim Pool, who we said is not a Republican, and go, man, Tim Pool's right on whatever, man, that's kind of, he's right, which might lean more right. And man, Trump has that value. I'm going to go vote for Trump. And now, counterpoint, that can go, wow, yeah, they're right on, I don't know, abortion. Like, that's Harris. I'm going to go vote for Harris. So, these things, work both ways. But you don't attack those people. You attack the people that are in your party trying to, your values.
Right.
So that's my whole point of it, is like, let these truth seekers say what they want, as long as they're, factual information. Plus, you have freedom of opinion and stuff, you know. So yeah, criticize, you know, tell them they're wrong as far as like, you know, if Joe Rogan, you know, abortion or whatever, something like that, you know, yeah, no, you're wrong on this. That terrible opinion, whatever, this, that, and the other, or like, here's why you're wrong, give them the facts, this, that, and the other. But attacking somebody, come on, you know, that's not who we are. You know, that's right. That's not, and it's not going to help us. It's not going to help us. And then when Trump does it, it's times like these that I'm glad he's not on Twitter. I think he needs to come back on Twitter, but if he's going to just do the attacking thing, no, sorry, X, he needs to stay off of it. But, yeah.
Gotcha. Well, we can go into another segment unless you wanted to wrap this up, or if you had anything else you wanted to say about everything. So I think the next segment, and this is going to be a bit of a deeper discussion, which I've been looking forward to because a lot of, you know, and I was thinking about on the other podcast I have, there are so many shows, podcasts, and other discussions online that are all about, hey, this happened today, hey, this happened yesterday, hey, this happened just now. And, you know, it's important to talk, for example, about Trump being shot at. It's important to talk about Harris being the nominee and our thoughts on that, our thoughts about the future debates, things like that. But it's also important sometimes to have a different discussion, to have a discussion that's kind of timeless, a discussion more philosophical and more about political theory, which I think is important. I think it's important every so often. And this sometimes sneaks into the peripheries of covering current world events, of identity, of being a conservative, and messaging, and political theory, political tactics. Because sometimes what I'm saying is it can be so day to day that you're not really thinking about the movement itself and what's driving it.
Right.
And it's important. I mean, a lot of people, especially, this was the cool thing back in 2016, 2018, 2020. Was people started rejecting labels and saying, well, I don't really like to call myself this, or this. And it's like, okay, sort of understand that. I do think labels are very important. I think that what I try to do whenever someone uses a label, I say that's helpful, but break it down for me a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, because there's people that try to reject all labels. It's like, I don't think that's helpful. I think that whenever we talk about a liberal or about a Democrat or Republican or conservative, okay, well, let's break that down a little bit. Let's not do away with it. That would be throwing out too much. So, with all that being said, what has come up and over the course of time is we've come on here before to you guys talking about a couple of things. I think probably the way it first came up was the war in Ukraine. Talked a little bit about Putin, and then talked a little bit about a Russian philosopher, Alexander Dugin.
Yeah.
And so we want to talk about him a little bit to you guys and have a discussion. And then we want to then deviate slightly and talk about broader political theory. And so I think the best way to begin this is to just talk about who he is. Some of you are probably like, well, who? So Alexander Dugin is a philosopher in Russia, born and raised in Russia. He has been, if you want to see some of his stuff, he's been on the Nexus Institute and talked to Anthony Blinken, who's now in the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. That's kind of interesting. I did a double take when I saw that. I thought, oh, that guy's in government right now. He's in the Biden administration. He's also had discussions with other people. His perhaps best well-known book is the
Russian
Foundations. Russian Collusion. His perhaps best-known book is the Foundations of Geopolitics. He's also got a book called The Fourth Political Theory. And I have read The Fourth Political Theory in its entirety. And in the course of time, we've come on here and talked a little bit about him. The most recent interview that I've seen with him that got some attention was while Tucker was in Russia talking to Putin, he also had the opportunity to speak to Alexander Dugin.
Right.
And so this actually kind of naturally was a discussion that started to happen between you and I, and we had the thought, why not do it in front of a camera? Why not? Sure. Why not only talk about this privately, but why not also talk about this in front of other people and have a discussion about this political philosopher? And I really think it'd be a good jumping off point to then talk about broader political theory.
Yeah, for sure.
So real quickly, I think that the best way to begin with this, I've been trying to figure out, well, where do we begin? I would say the first thing I would say about Alexander Dugin is first just sketch out in its entirety your views on him.
Yeah.
What you think of him problems with his philosophy, if you see anything that's a cogent criticism he has of the West, please sketch out any pros that you see, but also be clear about the cons. And I'll talk about what I see, and then we can kind of break down a little bit of what the other is saying.
Yeah. So Dugin, the problems that I have with him, or like how I view him, is okay. Yeah, he's an advisor, obviously, but no, he does see the issues of, I'll say, the West. Yeah, I mean, because that's a big thing of his. He sees the issues of the West as far as the LGBT squad going way too far. He sees the issues as far as the DEI stuff. He sees the pretty much all those identity things. He sees this identity stuff has gone way too far. We've veered the West. So not just America in this case, has veered way too far from traditionalism, small t, traditionalism, and he sees that as a problem. The thing that I believe where he is wrong is the traditionalism that he seeks is more of a government-run traditionalism versus traditionalism in the sense of, freedom. Essentially, traditionalism, government stays out of it, but the people are the ones that maintain the traditionalism instead of the government comes in and establishes traditionalism, and the reason and that's how you get tradition back. I say the people are the ones that have to bring the tradition back, not it's the government's job to bring the tradition back, because I believe that can lead to potential issues. When you get government involved in things like that, you can lead to, government-run churches, this, that, and the other. So yeah, those are kind of my main views on him from what I've read. I haven't read his books or anything. However, I have done some research on him and everything like that. Also listened to Glenn Beck is a guy that actually turned me on to him as far as interest in him. So kind of have listened to some opinions of Glenn Beck and everything. So yeah, those are kind of the concerns that I have about him and everything. So yeah.
So I said initially that I was going to now talk about him, but let me real quickly, just to be clear, when you said traditionalism, small t, what does that mean?
So small t is, like I said, the small t traditionalism, in my opinion, is where the people are the ones that keep and maintain or conserve the traditions of, in this case, we'll say America. It's the West as a whole, I guess, but to maintain what the traditions. Yeah, the tradition. So church, prayer in schools, straight marriage, the list goes on from there. Those are just some points. Big T traditionalism is the government again comes in and establishes tradition. At first might start off well, but eventually it turns into a totalitarian thing. And yeah, the government's job is to maintain that. And I don't have faith in a singular person to maintain that versus I have a little more faith in multiple people, I guess. Just because you get multiple points of view versus one guy, you get his view of life. If we only run off of me and my point of view on things, there's going to be an issue later down the line somewhere. Same with you. Same with anybody. If they're the only ones running things like that, except for God, of course. That's the exception, of course. So yeah, that's the big T, little t for me.
Okay, so and we can discuss in a second. So real quickly, my perception of his book. If you guys want to hear the full review, you can go to the Fog on the Whirlwind and look it up. But I'll restate. So in essence, my perception as I read his book, number one, I perceived him to be extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that he's a stupid person. I'm not going to say that Karl Marx was a stupid person. No. I think he came to a lot of the wrong conclusions, and his philosophy for sure, every time you implement it, is wrong. Speaking about Marx, there's no way it's not just well, good concept, bad follow through. It's like, no, it's a bad concept, and the follow through has always been bad because it cannot be done correctly.
Yeah, right.
So, and I'll come to that in a second, but I will say, so intelligent guy, there's a number of things. So his big fourth political theory, there's a number of things to know. So what is the fourth political theory? He labels it as Eurasianism, and the concept of Eurasianism has a historical subject. Every political theory has a historical subject. So the first political theory actually is liberalism. And when he says liberalism, he is not talking about, FDR over there or Obama over there is a liberal. No, he's talking about all liberalism. This goes all the way back to John Locke, who made the social contract over in England. So the historical subject, which is, for lack of a better term, the axiom, the point of focus for liberalism, is the individual. Individualism, individual liberty, individual property, so on. Then you have the second political theory, which the second political theory really was made to critique the first one. This is kind of the way that it goes. The second is critiquing the first, the third is critiquing the second and first, and then the fourth is critiquing all three.
Right.
So the second was communism / Marxism, which said, well, liberalism is wrong because it allows an exploitation economically, so on and so forth. One is workers' rights, the dictatorship of the proletariat, things like that. Then you've got the third, and so, by the way, their historical subject was class. That it's a class war, rich versus poor, in essence.
Which I would agree.
You have the third political theory, which he kind of lumps in together, but he also draws a distinction. It's a little hard to follow, but he basically says the third political theory is fascism. He throws in National Socialism, and then he makes a difference. So he says the third political theory, fascism's historical subject, is the state, which that's what Giovanni Gentili and Benito Mussolini said, everything inside the state, nothing outside of the state.
Yeah.
Then he pivots and says, but with the case of National Socialism, that was race.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the fourth political theory, well, what is its historical subject? It's the concept, and it's a Latin term, Dasein, or Dasein, D-A-S-E-I-N is how we put it in the English alphabet. The concept of being. And with the concept of being, you also have to look to the past, because the way that you are right now, in a lot of ways, is tied to how you were as a little boy.
For sure.
The environment your parents raised you in, the environment your parents were raised in,
things that
go all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the concept of Dasein is the state of being, and that is the important thing. That is the axiom. Is that people should be allowed to be. People should be allowed to have their own culture. People should be allowed to be the way that they are, and to have this strong connection to the past, to tradition, right? So that is the fourth political theory in a nutshell. Now, he has in his book, and I may flip through it if I can't remember the exact quotes.
Yeah.
But in his book, he does say that it is a crusade, and you can hear this, by the way, in his speeches as well, that it is a crusade against modernity and post-modernity. He, in the book, talks about modernity and post-modernity, and really, he does criticize the second political theory and the third, but primarily goes against the first political theory, against liberalism. Now, he really is genuinely, I believe, against all three. So what I will say, and again, this is leading into more discussion because I want to turn it back over to you and have some more back and forth, is I would just say that I've seen at least a video that Glenn Beck has done. I don't think I've seen all of his commentary. I don't know how many times he's talked about the guy. The only one that I saw that I could find that said Blaze TV, Alexander Dugin, was like a 3 or 4 minute long clip of him talking about him. And so it may be he's talked about him since then. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But real quickly, it was eerily similar of what we hear from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, in that Glenn Beck threw around the term fascism like 10 or 20 times. And it's like, okay, Alexander Dugin denounces fascism, not only in the book, but in many of his speeches. He makes very clear, I am not a fascist. I'm anti-communist, and I'm anti-liberal, and I'm anti-fascist. So it feels like, to me, and again, if you want to debunk this, please do, that Glenn Beck hasn't really done his research on that topic, because if he had actually read the source material, if he read the book, he would know, no, there's issues that Dugin has, and I can go into some of those issues.
Yeah, for sure.
That Dugin has with fascism, that and Dugin regularly says so. So to turn it back over to you, let's do this. So again, you can challenge or question anything I just said, but I think a helpful direction to go would be, you've made statements privately. I don't know if you've on the podcast you did call him, you called him a scary guy.
Yes.
But you've also said privately that he's an evil guy.
Yes.
And I want to go into that a little bit more, besides what you've already covered.
Yeah.
Because to me, my mindset is strong claims demand strong evidence.
Yeah.
So let's now go into what shows this to be an evil person.
Right. No. So as far as the scary guy, again, that goes back to, I know you claim, he claims, not you. He claims that he's anti-communist, anti this, that, and the other. A lot of people say things like that, so like, just because you say something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Now, granted, yes, I have to take a person for their word. So, okay, let's just take them for the word. When some of the conversations I've heard from him, and also, by the way, Glenn Beck does go more into it. I'll try and find the podcast for you that he went more into it. But no, he definitely talks about how it is essentially, going back to the big T, little t thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially the job of the leader to control this stuff, which I strongly disagree. Now, again, maybe evil at the time, privately wasn't a good word. However, I do find that scary. The scary thing, definitely 100%. When somebody talks about, and again, lines up with AOC, I find that a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily, although then again, we've lined up with AOC a few times. We seriously need that board. But yeah, so I do find issues, because here's the thing, he lines up with AOC.
Can I pause you? How?
I mean, you were the one that stated that he lines up with AOC as far as some of the situations, talking points as far as just the government. I forget what you had said word for word. You had said he had lined up with something. He and AOC said something similar, so I forget the exact point. So yeah. I'll retract that statement. But no, the big thing that concerns me is just how do you take traditionalism back? A lot of the points he makes, but his way about those are what concerns. So as far as, again, it's not the job, in my opinion, it's not the job of the government to take these things back. It is the job of the people to take these things back, and in their own state, in their own life and everything else. Tradition is different for everybody. For one, tradition is also for you to preserve, not a government. Government does not set tradition. You and other people set tradition. For example, let's just take Thanksgiving for an example as a tradition. That's a tradition in America. People set that. The government didn't set that. Sure. I mean, yeah, the government recognizes Thanksgiving, but we as a people, not us, but you know what I mean? We as a people got together and made that a thing and preserved that. So that's my big thing, is that's the biggest thing, is preserving tradition is within the scope of the people, not the scope of the government. So there's that. Also, there was another thing, and I lost my train of thought. Dang. Yeah, if you want to go off that, I might rethink them. I may rethink them.
Okay, if you do, definitely interrupt.
Yeah. Well,
just interrupt and say, I remember.
Yeah, for sure.
To go into, let's. I think we need to dig a little more deeply, and this may be better revisited as we move away from Dugin and toward conservative philosophy.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's funny to me because there's something that I guess I don't grasp or understand because when the Republican primary was still going on, you were very supportive of Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
Rightly so in many ways. What I guess I'm struggling to see is, in one sense, you're opposed to government intervention, but then you look at how DeSantis is running Florida. And let me give you some examples. Some
for sure.
Cut and dry examples. So he comes in as a government official, so this is government stepping in and saying minors are not allowed at pride parades.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of more libertarian types, and you actually saw this during COVID too, will say, well, that's a government official, I have to oppose this. Whereas the more nuanced conversation about DeSantis as far as COVID is concerned was, well, but he's actually protecting rights by saying, for example, you can't be fired for not wearing this or for not taking this. With the sense of the pride thing, he's protecting children.
Right.
So that is a legitimate role of government that you are supporting. And whenever I read Dugin, to me, it's apples and apples. We're talking about government stepping in to do the right thing versus evil being there if we don't.
Right.
So I guess my comeback, and again, we can get into this a little bit deeper, is I don't really know what other choice the right wing has other than, again, in certain situations, not all across the board. If you want to say not as far as he takes it, probably going to agree with you.
Right.
But, and I didn't really go into so much my criticisms of him, but I will just say that to me, I'm having a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around the support for DeSantis doing certain things that certain people would call authoritarian. And then being against Dugin, because to me those are very similar, and I guess I need to see some differences.
Right. So the first thing I would say is he was elected by the people. You know, he won wholeheartedly. Now, again, I know that's not a complete argument there, of course, but you know, there's that. So he is. All government officials are supposed to be elected to speak for the people that voted, you know, for them. So they are supposed to push forth we'll use tradition in this case, you know, because that's the argument here. They are supposed to push forth the tradition of the people that voted for them. You know, so if a leftist got in, they're supposed to push forth the leftist tradition, whatever the heck that is. But, you know, versus, you know, Ron DeSantis, he's elected to push forth I'm going to use American tradition in this case, you know, just, you know, Thanksgiving, normal marriage, this, that, and the other. The difference there is, though, and this is the difference between Trump and DeSantis, in my opinion, is so Trump, when he got in, he signed a bunch of executive orders. You and I mean, that's just a fact, you know, right or wrong, and agree with them or not, you know, he did. Biden, same thing. Whereas DeSantis's approach is he actually gets it through by law, as far as he gets it through the system. You know, he doesn't do a lot of stuff just him. You know what I mean? So it's his doing, but at the same time, he's the one that pushes for other people. You know, he does get other advice, I guess is what we could call it, or other people involved. It's not just versus Trump. Boom, executive order. Unless, you know, unless the Supreme Court sees it bad, you know, it's kind of set in stone for the most part. So you get my point on that. So there is at least, because in Florida, you know, you get to also elect your state house, this, that, and the other, of course. So he has to push it, or at least the way he does it, not has to, but the way he does it is at least pushes it through the other elected people. So therefore, you are still, at least in theory, going through the voice of the people. Yes, you are the main spokesperson of the people that elected you, but you're also pushing through the other people that people also elected as well. You know, your state Supreme Court and your state courts and everything else. You're also going to them and trying to push it through the way the system is supposed to work. Versus, you know, again, Trump, Biden, and everything else. It's kind of just executive order this, executive order that. So yes, government does preserve does preserve tradition in a sense. However, it is not. It's only because they are, again, there to preserve the traditions that the people, they're supposed to be the spokespersons, not, well, I'm here to, just push my opinion, my traditions. I'm here to push the traditions of the people that elected me, not the traditions of, myself or whatever. And the reason that I have an issue with, the big T side of things is, one, initially it could be okay, but at first, later, corruption is the issue. So I'm trying to look at it from a broader perspective of things. That's where it later down the line could get potentially bad, as far as, like I said, government-run churches, this, that, and the other. So yeah, that's kind of where I see that side of things.
So I'm going to sketch out, I think, what you're saying and make sure I understand.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then I'm going to respond.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I think you're saying, and we're gonna put it this way. So there's a big difference. This is an example between Trump getting voted in.
Yeah.
So he was voted in.
Right.
Legitimately, and signing executive orders, whatever
right
kind,
or wrong,
whatever kind they are. Let's just say the right kind.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is there's a difference between him doing that and DeSantis in Florida saying, all right, so in the municipal, in the state, let's work through the courts.
Yep.
Let's work through the state legislator, the state senate
first,
put it on my desk,
right.
Then I sign it. And the distinction you're drawing is that people are voting for example, the clerk of court in Florida,
mm-hmm.
State senator in Florida,
mm-hmm.
state representative in Florida, and then ultimately the governor.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the state house and just everything. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got these systems, and then it goes to the governor's desk. He signs it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying the system I just outlined in Florida is superior to the former one because one is signing a law. Let's just use the term traditional values, small t.
Yeah.
Regarding the Pride Parade as an example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he is doing that because Floridians want him to.
Right.
So that is an example of him instituting tradition because Floridians want him to. This is good because it went through the proper channels, got to his desk. He's instituting it properly. So you would say that is superior to the first scenario of Trump signing executive order.
Yes, and also because the people also went through, and again, not saying that these things that Trump did were wrong or whatever. We're just going to assume, right either way, in these contexts. But yeah, the reason I say that is superior is because these other officials are elected. So going through these, you're making sure you're getting all of what your people voted for. So it's not just, hey, I'm doing this because the people that elected me want this, versus, which would be in this case an executive order. All right, the people that elected me. All right, what about the people that didn't elect you and the people speaking for those other people? There could be like a middle ground or something else, Now again, not in all cases should there be a middle ground. I understand that too, but my point is at least pushing it through the system, yes, is superior because you have more voices heard, and essentially I believe that's the way it was supposed to be run in the first place anyway. So yeah.
So I will just say, and this is a situation where it may be that we just disagree and that's fine.
Yeah.
That I don't really see a difference between, okay, Trump's elected by whatever it was, 80, 90 million people in 2016, let's just say.
Uh-huh.
And he is hearing constantly build the wall, deport them, bring back jobs, etc.
Right.
No more wars. He signs executive orders to try and institute the MAGA agenda because he was voted for.
Mm-hmm.
Ticks off all the libs, the people in the middle that feel unheard, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see a difference between that versus what's going on in Florida, because you still run into the issue of the opposition and the unheard.
Right.
Because there's people in Florida, especially in Miami, who are extremely liberal.
Right.
who are very angry that DeSantis is doing what he's doing. They kind of pitch the fit that happened in America. Well, if Trump becomes president, I'm going to go to Canada.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, I'm leaving Florida, and then they just sit there.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I thought you were leaving Florida,
Yeah.
but you're not. Like the stuff with Disney, etc.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is, I don't see a difference. All I see is a difference of mechanism. You
Right.
have a mechanism over here, which is working through the state legislators and stuff like that. And that's a good mechanism. I think that it's good. And if you want to, say, well, it's better because of checks and balances, I'm probably going to agree with you.
Yeah.
My point is, I am for these values being fought for, no matter the mechanism.
Okay.
I don't really care if it's, an unelected bureaucrat on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, for sure.
Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah, right.
Or Neil Gorsuch. Or Amy Coney Barrett.
Right.
And again, there's a lot of agreement here. I don't have a problem with that person as long as they make the right call.
Yeah.
Which there's been times they make the right call, times they make the wrong call, and that's a future discussion.
Yeah.
But whenever they make the right call, am I happy with it? Of course I am. Am I happy when Trump made the right call as the head of the executive branch? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Am I great with DeSantis doing what he's doing? My point, I guess, is, and let's tie it back to Dugin a little bit.
Yeah.
Is Dugin is saying, and if you want to call it government-run religion, I have to push back about that a little bit, because in the book, he is not pushing, this is just to use, again, loaded language, but here we go.
Yeah, for sure.
He is not pushing for, let's just say, what's the term? Orthodox theocracy, because he's Orthodox.
Yeah.
Not at all. This is actually a cogent criticism that I have of him. Because to me, so one thing he says in the book, and this to me shows this is not a man of the right. He's either neither left nor right, or he might even lean a little bit toward the left. So he in the past has actually been in a national Bolshevik movement. So that's very much economically in agreement with communists.
Yeah.
Very much. I mean, down to exploitation of labor, you name it. I mean, he pretty much is there when it comes to economics.
Yeah.
Different when it comes to other social issues, but now that's in the past. He now says he no longer is a national Bolshevik. He says he is a conservative or a Eurasianist for political theory, whatever.
Right.
So the point is, he says that, and when I read that, I say, okay, so you at least formerly, maybe currently, were a man of the left. Then whenever he mentions Iran, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, foreign countries, Haiti and China, he is very much not going to critique those countries for their culture.
Right.
Now, I would say the American, especially old culture, there's a part of America that's still good. A lot of it's going an evil direction when you look at what's on TV, for example.
Of course. Yeah.
But the old culture of America is superior, for example, this is an example, is superior to the Taliban.
Yeah.
He's unwilling to make that call.
Right.
He is, in a weird way, multicultural in a way that I am not.
Right.
And so, with that being said, because he has the beliefs that he has, whatever he's referring to tradition, it actually is said in the book by the editor who sat down and talked to Dugin.
Right.
That whenever Dugin is talking about tradition, he's talking about intrinsic values to the traditions of the countries where people are living. So tradition, for example, big T tradition in Iran is not going to be big T tradition in America.
Yeah, in Russia.
It's not going to be in Russia, China, so on and so forth.
Right.
So my point is, the reason why I struggle a little bit to see the difference between big T tradition, as you put it, and small T tradition, is because if the people, let's just use the term democratically in America, say we reject wokeism, we reject abortion up until the 9th month, so therefore we're going to elect for, let's just say they elect DeSantis to be president.
Yeah, for sure.
And DeSantis unilaterally, this is a hypothetical, says, all right, executive order, we're having an abortion ban at certain months or weeks. I wouldn't have a problem with that, because what do I see? I see it actually saves lives. So if there's a moral evil being committed where it's like, well, government's being too big, that is a smaller issue than the innocent children being killed in the womb.
Right.
That's my mindset. Now, other people will say, well, okay, but you got to look at the long term and see, well, what then can government do against you?
Right.
Here's the issue that I have, and maybe this will propel us into
for sure.
the other part of the discussion. What I see when I look at history is a right-wing, a conservative movement in America that for decades has said we can't use power against the left, otherwise they'll use it against us. And overall, the country is more morally deplorable, worse off financially, economically, but more importantly, culturally and morally. And the only way to get it back is no matter what, and I do think localism is the best avenue.
Yeah.
No matter what, we are willing to use power.
Yeah.
Because if you notice, the left's biggest fear was DeSantis getting elected and Trump being elected. That is what drove them actually into the streets and got violent.
Oh, for sure.
So they hate it so much. And really, in a lot of ways, it's a classic example of chess, and a classic principle is you make the move your enemy wants to make you to make the least.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's how you win. DeSantis is such a man in many regards. Not perfect, but great in many ways.
100%.
And again, does he use localism? Yeah, I think he does. I think that's a good avenue. But there's times where you have to say to yourself, okay, like here's an interesting question. Let's say the state legislator or state senate in Florida just wasn't having it.
Yeah.
DeSantis was really wanting to sign this bill into law about banning minors from pride parades.
Yeah.
And the state was still too blue, and they said, you're not doing it.
Right.
We just don't have the votes. We don't have the support.
Right.
To me, then, again, the size of government is irrelevant. You've got to step in and make a moral call.
Right.
And say, okay, well, then I'm going to sign an executive order.
Right.
That's my call. And that may make me big government, and my mindset is if this makes me big government, so be it.
When it comes to the abortion thing, I'm inclined to agree.
Okay.
So like with the abortion thing, I would have to agree on that one.
Sure.
If you take any other issue though, except for I don't know, pedo stuff, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say pride parades, right?
Generally.
Yeah.
So rather than just the minors, let's now switch topics and say, let's say there's legislation being proposed to ban pride parades outright.
Yeah.
Let's discuss this.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So let's say that the DeSantis wants to ban them outright. Okay. The rest of the legislature does not want to do so.
Okay.
My solution to that one is for DeSantis in this case to go out and have rallies, because again, the voice is for the people, so sometimes you can elect people and they don't do what you want them to. I mean, that's with anybody, so there are things that, Trump failed on and this, that, and the other, Biden, yeah. So yeah. And also, I mean, not everybody's going to get everything done within that amount of time, but if there's something that you strongly believe in, whatever, you then go to the people, have, I don't know, again, a rally and say, hey, you need to, these guys are elected by you in the first place. You need to be calling your legislators. You need to be peacefully protesting, because apparently we have to add that now. You need to be peacefully protesting at your state houses and stuff like that, and making it known that, hey, first off, you're not going to get elected again. Second off, this is what needs to be pushed. Third off, this is the tradition of our people, as far as like a majority, so pushing the tradition of the majority, in this case, is what I believe, he should do. Is, all right, if you can't get it through the legislator, or if you can't get it through, then go out to the people and be like, hey, this is what's going on. Put pressure on them. And again, peacefully, that, but, but yeah, that is what I would do. Because ultimately, and if people don't, let's say DeSantis was somehow elected, but then the people also elected this. DeSantis then goes out and protest. DeSantis then goes out and tries to rally people up. People don't come. Well, in that case, it's left up to the people then, because they apparently don't want this tradition as much as they wanted. I don't know. They could have elected him for economics. They wanted the economic side. So that's what we really elected you for, this, that, and the other. We didn't elect you to, ban pride parades. We're not concerned about it. You then have to, as the government, and again, I'm trying to take the religious aspect out of this, of course, you know, you then as the government official have to be like, all right, you know, my people are for pride parades and I've got to let this be, even though myself, I'm against it, whatever, I've got to let this be. Yeah. But again, if nobody, that's if nobody shows up to these, you know, rallies and everything or whatever. If people do show up to these rallies, you know, of course, tell them, hey, go protest, go be at the state house, this, that, and the other. Make sure these people know that they aren't going to get elected again. So that would be kind of the situation in like a split legislator, in my opinion.
Okay, so so governor versus state legislator.
Yeah, pretty much.
That would be the solution,
right? And it's up to the people then at that point. For me,
the question becomes: so the way that I see this, I think that the crux of the disagreement and difference is, in your mind, the voice of the people being heard is most important, even more than the people of a certain state tolerating an evil.
Taking out the religious aspect of things, yes. As
long as these people want evil, they should be allowed to do evil if that's what they want.
Yeah, they want cake, let them have cake. You know, I mean, they called for it. Now, again, I'm also for the state by state. So if one state doesn't want it, you don't force the other states to have it. So like, yeah, that's where, you know, again, this is a state by state thing. It gets worse if the federal does it and makes it federal. So like if South Carolina, for example, doesn't want pride parades at all, there's no reason that the federal should make us have it because we've already made it clear that we don't want it. So the federal doesn't step in there and make something just because one state doesn't want it.
I definitely see where you're coming from, and what I'll say I do agree with is I don't really think that if someone as president or as governor tries to make a law on a populace that disagrees with it, I don't think it'll stand for very long.
Yeah,
so I think pragmatically that's probably true. The question then becomes, I guess, okay, so what if the people democratically get together and say, for example, well, Eurasianism is great and we want that.
Yeah.
It sounds like, though, you are willing to have the voice of the people obeyed in certain scenarios, but if they collectively got together and said, we want the government to make moral calls, let's just say, if the people democratically, and again, it sounds like you're okay with this, get together and say, no, we want to ban pride parades outright. Let's say they do what Tennessee has done and go on offense on the gay marriage issue and say, okay, that whether to officiate a wedding, gay or straight, that is the pastor or officiant's call. You, as gay people, are not able to go to an officiant and force them to do a wedding, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say the right starts going on the offense, and let's say they do. Let's say they go on the offense through the state legislature, through the state senate, and through the governor.
Right.
Sounds like to me that your disagreement is not really with Dugin, because I think Dugin would be fine with that based on what I've read of him. Because the sort of tradition he's talking about, he's not talking about, in essence, having a king force something on an unwilling population.
Right.
He's talking about a movement that has to sweep a country and change it for the better in a similar way to you're talking about.
Yeah. I guess I just think that it's on his side of things. It's not really a legislative thing, more so like a singular answer. He or Putin, I guess, are the answer. Versus it's not really he. I see the problem, therefore I'm going to fix it. Not we see the problem, we're going to fix it.
What if the people democratically elect someone who does that?
Well, then again, as I stated, if they want cake, let them have cake. So that you gotta you play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So in that case, yes, I would say if that's what you wanted, you asked for it. Just like in this case of Kamala, right?
Right.
That's what you wanted. You're stuck with it if she wins, legally or whatever. But so that's kind of so yes and no. I guess it's based off of the person, but again, if this is what the people wanted, give it to them.
Hold on. Okay. Well, I feel like this discussion's been good.
Yeah.
I understand your position a little bit more, and I think there's some slight disagreement. I don't think there's much. I think that you and I both would like to see a lot of these changes being made through the local level.
Yeah.
Which really, I will say, I think that maybe some of that's the distinction, is that political change in Russia is going to look different than political change in America.
And I think that's
because of the fact that we've got a constitution, we've got 50 states. There's regions of Russia, there's not states, so it's a little bit different. And so that's one area of difference between the two countries. I guess what I would say.
I also disagree with the. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Please go ahead.
I also disagree with the stance of Dugin as far as like not worrying about what other countries necessarily believe. I think it's at least important. However, I don't think you should necessarily enforce your stuff. There's ways of giving an idea of like, hey, your idea is like crap, try this or something. The way we do it is not good. I would be inclined to agree. But not only being concerned about America is good, but at the same time concerned about the way other countries, you still need knowledge about other things. Is my claim on that, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it's funny because, again, I guess I'm still struggling, and maybe we can leave off the discussion of Dugin about this point.
Yeah.
Because again, I guess the way it came across to me was your perception of Dugin was someone to get in there. Let's just use Putin as an example.
Yeah.
Is that Putin does not have the approval or the force of the people behind him.
Right.
That's your view. And so that's why Dugin's ideas are bad, is because it encourages someone to get in there and do things that people don't necessarily want. When my perception of Russia is a lot of them are very socially conservative and probably agree with at least some of what he's doing. Maybe not all of it. I'm sure not every Russian is like that. There are Russians in Russia that are very socially liberal, I'm sure.
Right.
But as a group, they seem to be okay with some of the stuff that Putin is doing. And I guess the point would be, again, in Florida, if the big thing is consent of the governed, I don't really see much disagreement, because it sounds like as long as someone has consent of the governed, then the elected official is supposed to do the will of the people.
Right.
And if this will of the people is to put in tradition, the small t and the little t loses its meaning in my view.
Right, yeah. And I can see that. I guess, again, it's kind of a difference in the countries in this case. Like you said, we have a constitution and we have 50 states. They, yes, of course, have regions and stuff, but they are run differently than us. So I think that's probably it's not necessarily like, oh, Russian guy bad. No, it's just the fact that, well, again, does Putin have the populist? Is he the popular guy there? Like, do the people majority want this? So that's kind of the concern there. So like when it comes to I guess I can agree with it to an extent. If the majority if the people want it, go right ahead. But if the people don't want it, that's where it can get out of hand. So that's where. Yeah.
So let me. There's another thing that just popped into my mind, and we'll discuss this in closing about Dugin, then go on to broader conservatism for very quickly. We're getting low on time. Regarding him being against modernity and post-modernity, do you have a problem with that?
Not necessarily, not completely. No. Honestly, no, I don't.
Now, so one thing that he has said, and I remember this was something you'd mentioned in a previous Zoo Nation episode about him.
Yeah.
Was you said that in his writing, so maybe you saw part of a page of his book or something. I'm not really sure where you saw this. That he has referred to the West as the Antichrist, and you had a big problem with that.
Yeah.
So please sketch out why, and I would like to examine his words a little bit more closely.
I have a problem, and yeah, I'll have to pull up the exact area.
Well, I can.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I have a problem with calling the West the Antichrist, as far as maybe. But when you call the West or anybody the Antichrist, you are then kind of implying, well, I have the answers. I am the savior, So it's essentially, I guess, the issue that I have with it is you are, or it seems like you are implying that you are the savior to this Antichrist issue, which then becomes, okay, so your problem is with the West and they're the Antichrist. Well, you want to get rid of it. Then it becomes, he says he's not concerned about, other countries and what they do. However, it seems like you're concerned about the West and what's your plan on dealing with that? So that's my concern with that.
I see. Well, so let's address a couple of things. So
yeah, for sure.
I think that let's look at probably what you're referring to, but I want to make sure that there's clarity. If this isn't what you're referring to, then tell me. So in the fourth political theory, this is the first chapter. He says, this is quoting Dugin. He's talking about how people need to believe in God and ignore those who talk about his death. So like Friedrich Nietzsche, much like we ignore the words of madmen. And then Dugin's speaking. He says, this marks the return of theology and becomes an essential element of the fourth political theory. When it returns post-modernity, which is globalism, post-liberalism, the post-industrial society, is easily recognized Christ or its counterparts in other religions, which is called Dajjal for Muslims, Erev Rav for the Jews, Kali Yuga for Hindus, and so forth. This is not simply a metaphor capable of mobilizing the masses, but a religious fact, the fact of the apocalypse. So he is calling liberalism, post-liberalism, the post-industrial society, the empire or the kingdom of the Antichrist. Now, here's on a page before, to me, why he's calling it this. He says, it is not by chance that the heroes of post-modernity are freaks and monsters, transvestites and degenerates. This is the law of style. And then he goes on to say, against the backdrop of the world's clowns, nothing and no one could look too archaic, not even the people of tradition who ignore the imperatives of modern life. So here you have him critiquing these evil people, right? When you look at the people who, this is a more modern example, the Olympics, putting on this crap show. This looks demonic. And to me, when I see this at the Olympics and I see the baggage thief that worked for the Biden administration or something, when I look at Caitlyn Jenner and when I look at Planned Parenthood, it's really hard to not look at that and then hear Dugin talking about America or the West being the empire of the Antichrist and saying, well, shoot, this guy sounds right.
Right. And I don't disagree with the statement within itself.
Okay.
It's the question of what is the answer? Because, again, when you make these statements, you are, as I've said, especially from another country, you are making it as though you have an answer. And then, again, as I said, he doesn't have concerns with other countries, but then all of a sudden he has a concern with the West, we're going to call it the West because these are Western values that he's talking about. Values. He has an issue with the West. So then the question is like, okay, so you don't have a concern about anybody else, but you have a concern with this one sect. I'm concerned that you're going to try doing so. Essentially, again, you're making it like you have that savior complex, like you're going to do something about it, when in reality, stay in your lane.
Not necessarily. I mean, the reason why I say that is, what did you just say? 5 minutes ago, you said we should care about other countries. We should just not force ourselves on them. But I mean, to me, nothing that I've read from him suggests at all. In fact, it suggests the opposite. Nothing that he has written suggests that Russia, for example, should force themselves on the West.
I guess
he is calling them out similarly to how we would call out the Taliban's culture.
Right, for sure.
He's calling out Western culture.
Right, for sure.
So I don't really see how A is leading to B, how A, him calling out the West, leads to B, I'm the solution.
Right. I guess the counterpoint to that is, as far as Russia goes, not getting into, the Ukraine and Russia debate, but as far as like the expansion of Russia, when does it stop? When does all that stop? Also, we've never been friends with them, as is. So when do the two clash? This, that, and the other. And again, when does the expansion stop? Because you're claiming right now because that belongs to us, this, that, and the other. That's your claim right now. Okay, cool. I'm staying out of that. But where does it stop when it's not a country? Does it stop when it's not a country? Which that falls more into Putin. But again, this is an advisor to Putin. So I guess it's more so the reason I have an issue with it is because it's not him. It's who he's advising, and that can potentially be misconstrued in a sense. For you and I, yeah, we would take that as like, okay, yeah, I can get with this, and these are the things that need to be done, this, that, and the other. However, you get that in the wrong hands. It's like, okay, I need to take care of this. I need to do this, that, and the other. So I guess the concern of is who he's advising is more so the point. To where it then becomes, yeah, let's take care of it. Yeah, that's kind of that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the only issue to have with that, I guess, is that you kind of run into sort of not quite guilt by association, but close to it. Like there's people who have always said, well, just look at Trump supporters. This person over here is evil,
yeah, right.
And he's a Trump supporter. It's a bit of a different situation because you have an advisor and a president of a country, right. I suppose. But, it's weird because it sounds like you're saying on the one hand, not completely, and I don't completely either, for the record, agree with Dugin, but, you sort of do with Dugin, but then you look at how Putin's applying it, and he's applying what Dugin is saying, but he's doing it wrong,
right?
Sort of,
right.
And then the question becomes, it's like, okay, but if Dugin is either advising him or he's not,
right?
So Putin is either following Dugin's instructions or advice, or he's not, and I guess the question becomes, is it what he's saying, or is it the audience that's listening to it? Because those are two very different things,
right?
Because certain things, there's for example, oh, I wish the shooter had this. There's not really a different way to misinterpret that. That is completely, set in stone, a call for more violence. But when it comes to this other stuff that we're talking about, entering into more of a gray area, I don't think the conclusion should necessarily be, for example, that there's like blood on Dugin's hands. And I know you didn't say that.
I get your point. I get your point.
But I think that you run into some weird swampland that's kind of a gray area where you say, well, my problem is not with him, it's with his supporters. Yeah. Because a lot of people say that, and that's where you start to go into guilt by association territory. Yeah, and I don't think that it's as cut and dry as that.
Yeah.
It's a difficult call.
I guess the point that I would have to that is Dugin is definitely advising him, and you do in some speeches. There was a speech, not recently, but there was a speech that Putin had about the West and their values. Mm-hmm. He does echo back a lot of stuff that Dugin does say.
Okay.
As far as just Western values, how it's not good. Which again, agreed. And how things like this need to be put down, essentially. Not exactly his words, but like taken care of, essentially. And I forget when that speech was made. I'll have to find that speech. I'll find that speech though. Remind me about that. But yeah, so you do hear him echo back these words. I guess the point is that, okay, sure, the ideology is not what's bad, I guess what's bad is who you are now advising, and then I have to question your intent by that. So if you're applying this, if he was then advising, I don't know, Kamala, let's say she's president, if he was advising her, that would go bad, because Kamala, if he chose to advise Kamala, it would go bad. if he chose to advise Trump, it would probably go better, in a sense. But yeah, so again, I do think that you do have some blood on your hands because you are also advising a person that, again, is not necessarily a good guy. I mean, you and I, we're not, Russia apologists, this, that, and the other, but you and I would both at least agree that Putin's not like the greatest guy, Same with, Ukraine. What's his name?
Zelensky.
Yeah, Zelensky. Yeah. But so like for that, my question to you would be like, if Hitler's advisors, do they have blood on their hands?
Well, I mean, maybe this is what you're saying. It depends on what they're telling him to do.
Right.
And then I think there may be, in that scenario, shared responsibility.
Right. So that's kind of where I come into is, yes, there is a shared responsibility here. So yeah, that would be the issue I have, not necessarily, I guess, with the ideology, but then how it's potentially being used. That is where you make the ideology bad, or the use of it bad, not the ideology itself. Does that make sense?
No, but I think it's, I don't know if we're going to really, I think we're going in circles. It's kind of hard to understand. I guess what I'm trying to understand, you said something earlier about if Dugin advised Kamala wouldn't go well.
Yeah.
And then the question is, okay, but if it doesn't go well, so is she following his advice or is she not? To me, that should be a pretty cut and dry thing. If the ideology, because again, there's been a lot of agreement about the fourth political theory.
Right, for sure.
If that was instituted correctly, should go pretty well.
Yeah.
But if it's instituted by Kamala, again, to me, either you're following the advice or you're not. So you either have to disagree with the whole fourth political theory on principle, which that's one position to take. But I'm not really hearing that. I'm hearing instead it's basically the outlet of delivery or the way that it's followed through on.
Right.
One claim to make, here's a claim. I'm not going to get all the names right, but let's just say the advisors for someone who commits a horrible act. Let's just say in Syria, Assad.
Yeah.
Okay. Or Saddam Hussein in Iraq.
Yeah.
The advisors there versus Dugin in Russia. And again, if you want to make the claim, well, Putin invaded Ukraine because Dugin told him to do it, that's a claim to make. It's not really the claim you're making, though. The claim you're making is that Dugin doesn't really have blood on his hands, but Putin invasion. But I don't like Dugin because he's advising Putin, and Putin's doing things I don't like. So I'm having a difficult time, I suppose, and it may be that this is just something that we're kind of getting into the weeds, and we can just end this episode. That's fine. Yeah. But I guess I'm still struggling to understand who's responsible. Is it the advice giver, or is it the person that is in charge of the country, which would be Putin?
And to that, just that statement right there, I would say both.
Okay.
I would say it's a shared responsibility. For example, go to the extreme extent. The advisors of Hitler, unless there was an advisor out there advising, hey, we should really not, kill Jews.
Right, but the point is, Hitler wouldn't listen to that guy.
He surrounded himself. He definitely had advisors, and he still had.
Well, but he didn't listen to the one guy.
Yeah. So that the one guy that he's not listening to is exempt.
But it would then be wrong to look at that guy and say, well, you're advising Hitler. What happened? It's like, well, he's not listening to me.
But when you are again,
so Hitler's action is disconnected from the advisor.
Right. But if you are parroting, in this case, then fall back to Putin, right? If you then fall back to Putin, where you are parroting some of the statements that Dugin makes, you're listening to an extent, And again, I'll have to pull up the I'll go back and find the what's called the speech and everything. But yeah, so that's how you if the person is then being parroted and things that they have said, well, you're listening at least a little bit. So therefore, that means that you do have somewhat of an influence on this person. So therefore, yes, that's where you share the responsibility versus, in the Hitler situation, he said nothing about the Christian advisor or anything of the sort. So therefore, he's not listening. Yes, that guy is exempt because he's not influencing Hitler whatsoever versus Dugin is influencing. Therefore, anything that goes wrong, you do share the responsibility because you have an influence in the situation. I'm not saying that you are the complete responsibility, but again, you do share the responsibility because you are being listened to.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to leave it. I think this was good. This was definitely what I wanted to achieve by talking about all this stuff. I think it was really productive. And so we don't really have time because we've gone over 2 hours to discuss just conservative philosophy further. We will in a future episode, and we'll talk about some other things as well. So, guys, I want to remind you guys, a big way to help this channel is to comment. We really want to hear your thoughts first and foremost, but we also want to hear ideas from you about stuff you want us to cover. And what do you think of this segment of the episode? And we're really looking forward to catching you guys up on other things going on with the podcast. And one thing we're trying to aggressively do is push the Trump campaign in a positive direction, as that's one of the purposes of what we do. We are not known, first, second, and only as Trump supporters. We're conservatives. Conservative, you want to call me that, and
Christian,
and Christian first and foremost, and then a mixture of conservative and libertarian with Nathan. And so there's going to be some small disagreements, nothing major. And so I want to thank you guys for watching this and in advance for commenting on this. And guys, if you're listening on Spotify, this is a big announcement. You can now comment on Spotify. Spotify has released that. And so you can comment and let us hear your thoughts there as well. So guys, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Zoo Nation. I'm Josh.
I'm Nathan.
Everybody have a great evening and